This Farbrengen is from the 8th of Cheshvan, which is today, the 1987 Tafshin Memchas, 1987, yeah. We're concerning the 7th of Cheshvan, which was the day before the Shabbos. That year, the 8th of Cheshvan fell out on Shabbos. All the days of the week are elevated on Shabbos. And not only elevated on Shabbos, but it says in Gemara, whoever works before Shabbos can eat on Shabbos. So that means that Shabbos eats from, Shabbos consumes, Shabbos is elevated from the energy the day before Shabbos. So what?
I think the word is, what is the word?
Mishat Shabbos. Whoever makes an effort before Shabbos can eat on Shabbos. So that means that the spiritual energy the day before Shabbos impacts the Shabbos. What's a special quality the day before Shabbos? Then the 7th of Cheshvan is a time when they begin to ask for rain in Israel. Looks like it trickled over to Los Angeles today too, Baruch Hashem. Why do they begin asking for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan? Because the last Jew arrives home on the 6th of Cheshvan, and therefore they ask for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan after the last Jew has already arrived home. The last Jew lives farthest from Yerushalayim, only arrives home on the 6th of Cheshvan, so therefore they ask for rain on the 7th. So the 7th of Cheshvan is the conclusion of the pilgrimage to Yerushalayim on Sukkot. It's a time when the last Jew has come home, he's come back to his vineyard, back to his fig tree, back to his personal space. So therefore it's an appropriate time to make an accounting about the holiday of Sukkot in order to draw down from the holiday of Sukkot and to cause impact to the entire year. One of the unique qualities of the holiday of Sukkot is the idea of joy. Besides the fact that all of the holidays are about joy, every holiday has its unique theme. Pesach is the time of our freedom, Shavuos is the time that God gave us the Torah, Sukkot is called the time of our joy. That means the main theme of Sukkot is the idea of joy. You see this also in many details of the holiday. Sukkot is for 8 days, so that means you have a lot of time spending in joy. Outside of Israel, it's 9 days, more than Pesach, which is 7 days, and outside of Israel, Pesach is 8 days, but there is a lot of time devoted to the holiday, especially the year that we said this Farbrengen, when Simchas Torah was before Shabbos, so there's like a 10th day of the holiday. So, 10th day of joy. And this joy continues throughout the whole year. As the previous Rebbe said, that the holidays of the month of Tishrei are generic holidays, meaning they're holidays that bring down energy for the entire year. Each holiday brings its unique content to the rest of the year. And regarding the subject we're in, the holiday of our joy is about bringing joy to the entire year. This is especially emphasized in the year, the Rebbe said this Farbrengen, the year of Tafshin Memches, which spells the word to be joyous. And besides the fact that it's the year is the numeric equivalent of the year spells the word joy, besides this year was a year of Hakel. Just like this year is a year of when Hashem commands us to gather the Jewish people on Sukkot together to the Bais Hamikdash to hear the king read the Torah, and the king everyone's supposed to come, men, women, and children, to hear the words of the Torah in order to inspire reverence for Hashem. So Hakel is something that continues throughout the entire year. It's called the year of gathering. That means that the whole year is associated with the mitzvah that was done in the holiday of Sukkot. And therefore there is a direct connection between the entire year and the holiday of Sukkot this year more than other years. So during this entire year, there has to be a unique effort through every single Jew, men, women, and children, to be involved in gathering people together, men, women, and children, in order to inspire reverence for Hashem. That's the call of the hour. So, according to this, it's understood that the 7th of Cheshvan, which is the conclusion of the pilgrimage to Yerushalayim for the holiday of Sukkot, and the beginning of our service of Hashem throughout the year, there has to be an emphasis on the 7th of Cheshvan about joy and about hakel, about gathering people together in order to continue this energy throughout the year. What this means is like this. The theme of joy, or the language that's used about the holiday of Sukkot, is a time of our joys in the plural, is that we connect two joys together. It says in one verse, let God delight, let God be joyous with His creations. Another verse says, let the Jewish people delight, let them celebrate their Maker. So the idea of our celebration in the plural is that there is a convergence of two joys. There's the convergence of God's joy with the Jewish people and the joy of the Jewish people in God. So although the main time for manifest joy is in the time of our holiday, the time of Sukkot, and that draws joy for the rest of the year, nevertheless, regarding the impact, regarding the specific service of Hashem that causes this joy, there is actually an advantage in the time period that follows the holiday season, that follows the time of our joy, beginning from the 7th of Cheshvan. There's something more about the service of Hashem that brings joy now than the holiday of Sukkot itself. Why? Because what are we happy about? What does it say in Tanya, chapter 33? The main joy of a Jew is to celebrate the fact that they celebrate God's joy, that God is joyous and happy about His home in the lowest realms. What is God's joy about? We're doing in this physical world. And when do we make an impact in the physical world, in the lowest realm within the world itself? In the 7th of Cheshvan, after the last Jew comes to his home by the Pras River, he comes back home to impact the world, to make the world a home for Hashem. So, in other words, he is finally able to achieve God's intent in creation, make a home for Hashem in the lowest realm when he leaves the Beis HaMikdash and he comes back to his home. Now I can do this. So, therefore, there's more of an emphasis on joy now, because what are we joyous about? We're joyous about God's joy. When is God celebrating the most? He's celebrating the most when you come home and you make your home and your environment a place for Hashem. So just like this is true for joy, there's more joy in the period when you are finally home and fulfilling God and causing God to have happiness. So too regarding Hakel, gathering the Jewish people, there's an advantage of what you do to gather people together now that surpasses what was done during the holiday season, during the holiday of Sukkot, starting off from the 7th of Cheshvan. What's unique about gathering people together now? Why is this better? Because on the holiday of Sukkot, when all the Jewish people gathered to see the face of God, as the Torah says, and all the Jews are together in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is called Ir Shechubal Yachtav. It's a place that makes the Jewish people all friends, makes them all together. So the fact that they're all gathered together in Jerusalem, it's not a novel thing, it's not so unique. When is there a unique accomplishment of gathering people together? When you're really doing something special, when you gather people together? When everyone comes home on the 7th of Cheshvan, and now they are in a state of being alone, in a positive sense, that everyone's under their own fig tree and their own date tree and they're spread out, and yet they make an effort and they achieve not only that they should have the positive element of being alone, which is also a positive element in some way, as the Torah says about the Jewish people, that they are a nation that dwells alone. And that's when Moshe Rabbeinu blesses the Jewish people, the biggest blessings, he first introduces them with the Jewish people dwell alone, so we're unique and alone, that's something. But there is, despite the fact that everyone's gone back to their fig tree and their date tree and they are spread out all over the world, nevertheless they still achieve that not only should they have the advantage of being alone and spread out, but they should achieve the virtue of being gathered together. And this is also especially connected to the way the calendar is set up this year. The year the Rebbe said this Farbrengen, on the 7th of Cheshvan being on a Friday and Shabbos immediately following it. Regarding Shabbos, the Talmud says in the Sifri, the days of your joy are the days of Shabbos. Regarding Hakel, gathering Jewish people together, it says in the Talmud on the verse, Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Jewish people together. God said, what does this mean? Gather people together every Shabbos. So both the element of joy is on Shabbos, and the element of gathering people together is also on Shabbos. Besides that, Shabbos, the essence of Shabbos is about tranquility and pleasure. As the Torah says, when Shabbos comes, you have to view that all your work is done. On Shabbos, you're supposed to cross the Shabbos in, you're supposed to call Shabbos a day of joy. That means that everything that we're doing throughout the year, thank you very much. I tried to bring it to myself and I burnt myself. I figured this must be your mitzvah. I shouldn't take it away today. So all the things we do throughout the year that starting from the 7th of Cheshvan have to be done since Shabbos follows the 7th of Cheshvan, especially this year, the year of Hakel. So Shabbos basically channels the 7th of Cheshvan and says to you, yes. Shabbos basically says to you that the way you should participate in Hakel is with a sense of happiness, tranquility, and pleasure. Okay. Now, so in short, we said so far is the greatest joy is when you're causing God to be happy. That's what the Jewish people celebrate. And when is God happiest? When you're making the world a home for Hashem. When is there a opportunity for you to gather people together? When they're in a state of separation. So really the main idea of joy and the main idea of gathering people together begins once you finally arrived home after leaving the Bais Hamikdash, and the parallel for that is the 7th of Cheshvan, which was yesterday. And so Shabbos following the 7th of Cheshvan emphasizes that yes, you have to be involved in all these things of joy and gathering people together, but do this with a sense of tranquility and pleasure and joy. Okay. We could connect this also with the Parsha of the week, Lech Lecha. The conclusion of Parshas Lech Lecha, the section that we read on Shabbos for Chitas, for the Chumash of the day, which is really not just the Chumash of the day, but the Talmud says, Hakol holach achar achitam, everything is connected to the conclusion. That means the conclusion of something has a unique distinction in classifying what the thing is in the first place. So what does it say in the conclusion of Parshas Lech Lecha? It says, and the portion that's associated with Shabbos, God says, I will establish my covenant between me and you, between your children for generations, an everlasting covenant. This will be my covenant upon your flesh. The mitzvah of circumcision. Why is the mitzvah of circumcision especially associated with what we're talking about? What's the 7th of Cheshvan about? It's about impacting the physical world and making a home for Hashem in the lowest realm. That's like the mitzvah of circumcision. And there is also the idea of joy and the idea of gathering Jewish people together. As we'll see, that this mitzvah uniquely highlights these three aspects of impacting the physical world, joy, and gathering Jewish people together. How does the mitzvah of circumcision contain all of that? So first of all, regarding the impact in the physical world, what's the unique thing about a circumcision? God says it's here to be a covenant where? In your flesh. That means it's not just a covenant with God, it's a covenant with God that touches and permeates your physical flesh in a permanent way, in a way that lasts forever. So Avram Avinu, before having the circumcision, was on a incredibly high spiritual plane. Avram recognizes God at the age of 3 and serves God for another 172 years, which is why the Torah says Akev, which literally means heel, but the simple translation of the pasuk of the verse is, because Abraham listened to my voice. When did Abraham listen to God's voice? For the amount of years as the word Akev, as that word has. The numerical equivalent of Akev is 172. Abraham is circumcised at 3, and he is serving God for another 172 years. And the way he served God was always on the onwards and upwards. He was always going higher and higher. As the Torah says in this week's Torah portion, Abraham is traveling and traveling. So that represents how Abraham isn't just serving God all the time, once recognizing God, but he's always going higher and higher. So that's Abraham pre-circumcision. He's always traveling, always going higher and higher. And yet, after he's serving God for decades, He's 99 years old. He's serving God in a very, very lofty level. God says to him, walk before me and become complete. Walk before me, Talmud says, and do the mitzvah of circumcision, and by doing this specifically, will you be complete? That means Abraham was missing something fundamental. God said to him, now you can walk before me, now you can be complete. Through the mitzvah of circumcision will you be complete. And the reason why he's not considered complete without the mitzvah of circumcision is because the mitzvah of circumcision is something that touches the physical. It's a covenant in the physical. That means through this mitzvah, there is something that's achieved in the context of this verse of walking before me. It's that Abraham is walking before God in a way that this connection to God is permeating his literal physical body. Everything he did before, and was all spiritual. Here, Abraham is finally able to achieve that his physical body is constantly attached and bound with God. So from this understood, the great necessity and the great benefit of doing something in the physical reality. It's something which is really fundamental. How do we see it's fundamental? Because after all that Avram did spiritually, what does God say? You're missing the main thing. You're missing the main thing. You're missing the ability to make an impact in the physical. Now I'm going to give you this opportunity. We find something even more. Even after the Torah was given, and now it became possible through every mitzvah, to channel godliness into the physical world. Nevertheless, there's something unique about circumcision now as well. Although every mitzvah brings holiness to the physical world, there's something unique about circumcision that surpasses other mitzvahs. The Torah says that when King David HaMelech, went to the bathhouse and he saw that he is standing naked, he says, "Oh man, oy li, woe is to me. I am standing naked without any mitzvahs." But then he remembered that he had a circumcision and he calmed down. That's what the Talmud says. Now, it doesn't make any sense. While he is in the bathhouse, certainly he had faith in God, certainly had love of God and reverence of God. There are 6 mitzvahs which are constant, which you always have to do. You can't stop them even for a moment. So why did King David say, "Oh, woe is to me, I am standing here naked without commandments, without mitzvahs"? He has so many mitzvahs. He has a mitzvah of love of God and reverence of God. Not only that,
How can we say we forgot about the bris?
What?
How can we say we forgot the bris?
That's another good question. I don't know.
You didn't forget because you remembered it. You brought to mind.
You brought to mind. All right. But the question is more. The mitzvahs that he was doing already, they're always in his mind. I mean, those mitzvahs which are always in his mind, love of God and reverence of God and faith in God, those are mitzvahs which are generic. They're, if you will, they're mother mitzvahs. As it says in chapter 4 in Tanya, love of God propels all positive mitzvahs. Reverence for God propels all to refrain from all things you shouldn't do. So if he has love and reverence for God, why is he upset? And the reason he's upset is because the main impact of a mitzvah has to be physical. And so therefore, even though he has love and reverence and faith, he's still considered naked without a mitzvah in comparison to the main impact of a mitzvah, which is physical. And this is the unique quality of the circumcision in the flesh, that even in a time when he can't do a mitzvah physically, he's in a bathhouse, still he has the covenant in his flesh. So, Rabbi Yosef, I guess the word is that he wasn't doing the mitzvah. In other words, he wasn't doing anything.
At that point, it's there, but it's not.
So you remember that it's still there. Like he's not doing anything. In other words,
as long as it's existing.
That the covenant with God is manifest in his physical flesh in an eternal way forever. And this is something which is, in Tanya it says whenever you do a mitzvah you make a bond with Hashem forever. But here what's unique is, it's not just unique, it's not just you have a bond with God in Lamaila. It says in chapter 25 in Tanya that when you do a mitzvah there's a spiritual bond that stays there forever through every mitzvah. Here there's something unique in the mitzvah of circumcision that's in the physical flesh. That although the physical body goes back into the grave and becomes like earth, nevertheless, it's something which is forever in the physical body. So, and even more, there are some mitzvahs that you do them and they're done. But with the mitzvah of circumcision, you are fulfilling the commandment every single moment. The Torah says, my covenant should be in your flesh. So as long as a covenant is there in your flesh, there is a mitzvah being done every single moment. It's not just the mitzvah is still impacting him, but the mitzvah is still being done. There's a mitzvah to be circumcised. And therefore, when King David remembered the circumcision, he was joyous because at this moment he is fulfilling the mitzvah, you shall be circumcised. And same too is regarding what we're talking about, the difference between serving God during the holiday of Tishrei, and during serving God and all the holy things we do in the month of Tishrei, and the way we serve God after the 7th of Cheshvan, after we're going back to the mundane, is similar to the difference between doing something spiritual versus doing something spiritual. Doing something physical. Thank you. So therefore, the virtue of the 7th of Cheshvan is incredible, because here is where we begin serving God in a physical way. Through this mitzvah, we are achieving the whole point of why God made the entire spiritual cosmos, so that he should have a home in the lowest realm, in this physical world, where there's no world lower than this world. So that's how we have the circumcision. That's why we see the element of impacting the physical in the mitzvah of circumcision. Now let's look at the mitzvah, the other element, the idea of joy. We said that this period achieves a greater joy for God because we're making a home in the lowest realm. How do we see this associated with the chumash, with the chitas portion, with the mitzvah of circumcision of Shabbos? So based upon what we just said till now about the great virtue of the mitzvah of circumcision, it's self-understood how great is the joy of the mitzvah of circumcision, because every single Jew who has done the mitzvah of circumcision, it has an eternal covenant with God. And it says clearly in the oral Torah, which is an explanation of the written Torah, that the oral Torah mentions the amount of Jews that observe various commandments. And the oral Torah, the Talmud, makes a comment and says, whatever mitzvah the Jewish people accepted with joy, they continue to accept with joy. And they say in the Talmud that because the Jewish people accepted the mitzvah of circumcision with joy, they continue to still do it with joy. And although, if you think about it, it's like something which causes pain to the child, and that's why some say you should not make the blessing Shechayanu, thank you for reaching this occasion, because the child is in pain, and yet it's a mitzvah that was done with joy. And that's why Jews continue to do this with joy. As it says in the Torah, King David said about this mitzvah, I am joyous about your words as someone who finds great wealth, that the Jewish people keep this mitzvah with incredible joy, the Talmud says, and therefore they continue. It's something that even till today, it's something that is very widespread. The Jews all over the world keep, even though other mitzvahs are not so into. So therefore, in every circumcision, there is a emphasis on joy before the circumcision begins. We recite that verse, I am joyful about your words as someone who finds great wealth. And we also recite the verse, may your father and mother and the one who bore you rejoice after the circumcision. And we make a celebration to celebrate the circumcision. So we see the idea of joy in circumcision. Now the third concept that we're talking about that is especially relevant to the period after the 7th of Cheshvan is the idea of hakel. How do we see the idea of hakel, the idea of circumcision? The mitzvah of circumcision, besides it being one mitzvah, one of the 613 mitzvahs, it's also something generic. It's a covenant between God and the Jewish people. It's something that sort of brings you into the fold of the Jewish people. In the language of Maimonides, look how weighty is the mitzvah of circumcision, because all of the other mitzvot, we made a covenant with God, we promised God we keep all the other commandments. How many times? 3 times. How many times does it say that there's a covenant about the mitzvah of circumcision? 13 times. In other words, the theme of the covenant, the theme of the mitzvah of the circumcision rather, is the unity of the Jewish people with God, the men and women, because the Talmud says the women are considered as if they have a circumcision. So men, women, and even children, and converts, they all unite with God with an everlasting covenant, and the covenant of Avram an eternal covenant. So the idea of hakel, of gathering Jewish people together, is emphasized in this commandment. That's the hakel is about bringing everyone together to feel like you're at Mount Sinai, that God's talking to you. That is the theme of the circumcision, a covenant with God, a promise to keep all the Torah mitzvahs. We could also add, another point about how hakel is associated with Lecha, and that goes as follows. Should we go for it, Dr. Bressman?
2 questions.
Yeah.
One, we very quickly skipped over that every woman has considered to be a circumcision.
Yes.
I don't understand that.
That means that the spiritual value of circumcision she has.
But it's not engraved in her flesh.
Right. It's considered. It's considered.
Yeah. Okay. And then the 13 times it's mentioned where? And what's the significance of 13, which is a new number?
Good question. I don't know, but it says in the Torah 13 times about the covenant. I don't know what the significance is. Okay. So practically, the mitzvah of hakel is done when the temple is erected, when the Jewish people are all living in Israel, and there are different definitions of all the Jewish people living in Israel. There is a time that when we had all 12 tribes living in Israel before Sancheiriv exiled the 12 tribes, and then there is the time we will live in Israel together when Mashiach will come. So and we'll have the entire land of Israel. So there's different levels of hakel, of gathering the Jewish people together. So this is especially relevant to Parshas Lecha, which talks about the covenant that God made with Avraham of promising to give him the land of Israel. So you see the idea of the perfection of hakel. All the Jewish people will be gathered in the entire land of Israel. So what's the bottom line? What's the lesson word for us? On this Shabbos, which the day before the Shabbos was the 7th of Cheshvan, and every Jew begins to make an impact in the world, we should publicize and announce again about the unique quality of this year, the year of gathering, that every single Jew, man and woman, from old to young, has to be involved in activities of gathering people together. They gather men, women, and children together and say in front of them words of Torah, especially the inner dimension of Torah, through the teachings of chassidus. And the impact of this is to cause reverence for God. And this is something that has a relevance to every single Jewish man and woman, everyone according to their level. And then there adds, everyone should do this according to how much they can, and even more than they can. And also we should publicize about the idea of joy, continuing the joy of the holiday of Sukkot throughout the whole year, an open and manifest joy, in a way that's seen and open to our eyes. And as a beginning, in this Farbrengen of Shabbos, and in this, the Rebbe says that we should start in an open way to have manifest joy, and should publicize this, publicize about joy, publicize about gathering people together. And may be Hashem's will, we should merit very speedily mamish to celebrate in Yerushalayim the perfection of joy and perfection of gathering Jewish people together with the coming of Mashiach. All right. Yeah.
So there is a connection, I guess, between women and circumcision, because wasn't it Sarah who circumcised Abraham?
Interesting. No, she didn't. God did.
Well, God.
God did.
Well, God.
God did.
Well, God.
God did.